A Roman emperor put his own sisters' faces on coins, then did things to them that historians could barely write down. Before he turned 30, this man had already declared himself a living god, bankrupted one of the richest empires in human history, and committed acts against his own blood that ancient writers refused to describe in full detail. His 3 sisters were supposed to be the most powerful women in Rome. He gave them privileges that no Roman woman had ever received before, and the entire empire celebrated what looked like a brother honouring the family he had almost lost. And then he did things to them that would make even the most hardened Roman senator look away. But the worst part was not what he did behind closed doors. The worst part was what he forced them to do in front of everyone. And when one of them died, his reaction proved that something inside him had been broken long before he ever sat on the throne. The boy who watched his entire family get destroyed grew up faster than any child ever should. Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus was born in 14 AD to one of the most beloved military families Rome had ever known. His father, Germanicus, was a war hero, the kind of commander that soldiers would follow into fire without hesitation. His mother, Agrippina the Elder, was the granddaughter of Augustus himself. Together, they represented everything Rome admired, from military strength to unshakable loyalty to a bloodline that stretched all the way back to the founder of the empire. But young Gaius grew up in army camps, not palaces. Soldiers dressed him in tiny military boots, and that is where his nickname came from, Caligula, which literally translates to little boots. The troops adored him. They saw a future emperor playing in the mud between their tents, and they loved every second of it. That warmth did not last. When Caligula was just 7 years old, his father died under mysterious circumstances during a mission in Syria. Most Romans believed he had been poisoned on the orders of Emperor Tiberius, who saw Germanicus as a threat to his own power. Caligula's mother certainly believed it, and she was not quiet about her suspicions. That loud grief would cost her everything. Tiberius moved against the family with brutal efficiency. Caligula's mother was arrested, beaten, and exiled to a remote island where she eventually starved herself to death. His 2 older brothers were imprisoned. One was starved to death in a dungeon. The other killed himself before Tiberius could do it for him. Caligula watched all of this happen, and he could do absolutely nothing about it. But Tiberius made a decision that would change everything. Instead of killing the boy, the old emperor brought Caligula to the island of Capri to live under his personal supervision. What happened on that island over the next 6 years is something ancient writers only hinted at. Tiberius was infamous for his depravity, and the historian Suetonius described scenes on Capri that would get this video demonetized in the first 30 seconds. Caligula, a grieving teenager with no family left to protect him, lived right in the middle of it. Years later, people close to him said the boy who arrived on Capri was not the same person who left. Something had shifted behind his eyes. But he learned the most important lesson Tiberius could teach him, which was how to smile while you plan someone's destruction. The moment Caligula took the throne, Rome erupted in celebration like it had not seen in decades. In 37 AD, Tiberius finally died. Some accounts say Caligula helped speed things along by smothering the old man with a pillow when he briefly recovered from illness. Whether that story is true or not, the result was the same. Caligula became emperor at 24 years old, and Rome lost its mind with joy. The people remembered his father. They remembered the golden family that Tiberius had destroyed. And now, the last surviving son was on the throne, and it felt like redemption. Caligula played the part perfectly. During his first 6 months, he was everything Rome wanted. He freed political prisoners, he recalled exiles, he hosted spectacular games and handed out money to the citizens. He abolished treason trials and burned Tiberius's secret files in public, a move that earned him thunderous applause. But the most unusual thing he did was elevate his 3 sisters to a position no Roman women had ever held before. Drusilla, Agrippina the Younger, and Julia Livilla suddenly appeared on imperial coins alongside their brother. He granted them the privileges of the Vestal Virgins, the most sacred women in Rome. At public events, his sisters sat beside him in places normally reserved for the most powerful senators. Rome thought it was sweet, a young emperor honoring the family that had suffered so much. The boy who lost everyone was finally rebuilding what Tiberius had torn apart. They had no idea what was actually happening behind the palace walls. What Caligula did to Drusilla went beyond anything Rome had ever seen from an emperor. Of his 3 sisters, Drusilla was his favourite, and that word does not even begin to cover it. Ancient historians, including Suetonius and Cassius Dio, wrote that Caligula's relationship with Drusilla crossed every boundary that Roman society recognised. He treated her not as a sister, but as a wife, and he did not bother to hide it. According to Suetonius, the relationship had started when they were both teenagers, back when they were living under the guardianship of their grandmother. They were caught together, and the scandal was so severe that it shook the family. But no one stopped it. By the time Caligula became emperor, he had the power to make sure no one ever could. He pulled Drusilla away from her husband, a senator named Lucius Cassius Longinus, and installed her in the palace. The husband could do nothing. Refusing an emperor in Rome was the same as signing your own death warrant. Caligula paraded Drusilla at state dinners, treated her as his empress, and according to multiple sources, openly referred to her as his consort. The Senate watched in silence. Senators who had survived Tiberius knew exactly how this game worked. You looked down at your sandals, you nodded when spoken to, and you prayed the emperor forgot your name. And if that was all Caligula had done with Drusilla, it would already be one of the most disturbing stories in Roman history. But what made it so much worse was the reason behind it. Caligula's obsession with Drusilla was not just about control or lust. Multiple historians noted that he seemed genuinely attached to her in a way that went beyond politics. She was the only person alive who remembered what their family had been before Tiberius destroyed it. She was the only person who shared his grief, his trauma, and his memory of their parents. That did not make what he did acceptable. It made it more disturbing, because it meant he understood exactly what he was taking from her, and he took it anyway. Roman senators whispered about it in private, but said nothing in public. Suetonius, writing decades later with access to imperial archives, still seemed uncomfortable putting the full details on paper, and he was a man who wrote openly about the depravities of 12 emperors without flinching. That should tell you how bad it was. And ordinary Romans, the ones who had thrown flowers at Caligula's feet just months earlier, began to wonder whether they had celebrated too soon. The golden boy was becoming something else entirely, and the transformation was happening in plain sight. But no one with the power to stop it had the courage to try. For a brief window, this was the state of things in Rome. An emperor who adored his sister too much, a senate too afraid to speak, and a city slowly realizing that its savior might be something far worse than the tyrant he replaced. It was an uneasy quiet, the kind that only settles right before something terrible happens. And then, something terrible happened. When Drusilla died in the summer of 38 AD, Caligula's reaction revealed the full depth of his madness. Drusilla fell ill with a fever, likely some form of epidemic disease, and she died in June of 38 AD. She was only 22 years old. What happened next shocked even the Romans, a civilization that had seen emperors do almost everything imaginable. Caligula declared a period of public mourning so extreme that it became a crime to laugh, bathe, or eat with family members during the mourning period. Anyone caught smiling could be punished. He wandered the palace at night, calling her name. According to Cassius Dio, he could not stay in one place. He would travel frantically between Rome and the surrounding countryside, unable to sleep, unable to stop moving. Then he did something that no Roman emperor had ever done for a woman who was not already legendary. He had the Senate officially declare Drusilla a goddess. Not a symbolic honour, an actual formal deification. Temples were built in her name. Priests were appointed to her cult. A senator named Livius Geminus swore under oath that he had personally witnessed Drusilla ascending to heaven after her cremation. Caligula rewarded him with a fortune. Another senator who failed to show enough grief was executed. Drusilla became Panthea, the divine one, the first Roman woman to be deified since the legendary figures of the distant past. Historians have debated for centuries whether Caligula's grief was genuine or performed. The truth is probably more uncomfortable than either option. It was both. He had lost the only person he truly cared about, but his grief expressed itself through the only language he understood anymore, which was power, punishment, and forcing the entire world to feel exactly what he felt. What he did to Agrippina and Livilla after Drusilla's death proved that his love for one sister had never extended to the other two. With Drusilla gone, Caligula's relationship with his two remaining sisters changed completely. The tenderness, or whatever twisted version of it had existed, evaporated. In its place came suspicion, cruelty, and a kind of cold calculation that even Tiberius might have admired. Agrippina the Younger and Julia Livilla had watched everything their brother did to Drusilla. They had seen the elevation, the obsession, and the horror. And now they were afraid, because they understood something that the Senate had not yet figured out. Caligula did not see his family as people. He saw them as things, to be used, displayed, or discarded, depending on whatever mood struck him that morning. According to multiple ancient sources, Caligula began using both sisters in ways that defied every Roman standard of decency. He would bring them to dinner parties with powerful men and essentially offer them as entertainment. He did not bother being subtle about it, and he certainly did not keep it behind closed doors. He did it in front of everyone. Suetonius wrote that Caligula routinely brought all three of his sisters, including Drusilla while she was alive, to banquets and positioned them beside his own dining couch, while his companions reclined on the other side. The implications were clear enough that even Roman writers, who were not exactly squeamish about this kind of thing, described it with visible discomfort. But Agrippina was not Drusilla. She was not going to sit quietly and accept her role as a prop in her brother's theatre of madness. Agrippina the Younger was ambitious, calculating, and patient. She had inherited her mother's ferocity and her father's strategic mind, and she began to plan. In 39 AD, Agrippina and Livilla were accused of conspiring against Caligula alongside a military commander named Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, who happened to be Drusilla's widowed husband. Think about that for a second. The man who had married Caligula's favourite sister, the woman he had treated as his own wife, was now allegedly plotting with his two remaining sisters to kill him. Whether the conspiracy was real or just a paranoid fabrication designed to give Caligula an excuse to punish them, historians still argue about to this day. But it almost did not matter, because the outcome was going to be the same either way. Caligula chose to believe the worst. Lepidus was executed immediately, but for his sisters, death would have been too simple and far too merciful for what Caligula had in mind. He stripped them of everything and sent them to die slowly on a barren island, carrying the ashes of the man they supposedly loved. Caligula seized all of Agrippina's and Livilla's property. He confiscated their jewelry, their estates, and every symbol of the status he had once given them. Then he exiled them to the Pontine Islands, a cluster of tiny volcanic rocks off the Italian coast that Rome used as a dumping ground for disgraced members of the elite. But he added one final humiliation. He forced his sisters to carry the ashes of Marcus Aemilius Lepidus with them into exile, the ashes of the man whose death they had allegedly plotted to avenge. Every step of that journey was designed to remind them that they had lost everything because of him. On the Pontine Islands, conditions were brutal. Limited food, minimal shelter, and complete isolation from the world they had known. These were women who had appeared on imperial coins, who had sat in the most privileged seats in the Roman Forum, who had been treated as semi-divine figures during the first months of Caligula's reign. Now they were prisoners on a rock in the middle of the sea, wondering every single day whether their brother would send someone to finish the job. The isolation was designed to be psychological torture as much as physical punishment. On the Pontine Islands, there were no allies to recruit, no senators to charm, and no way to send messages back to Rome. Agrippina and Livilla had to survive on whatever meagre supplies were sent to them, never knowing if the next ship would carry food or an executioner. Their mother had died on an island just like this one, starving herself to death in exile after Tiberius threw her away. And now her daughters were living the exact same fate, sentenced by their own brother instead of a rival emperor. Either way, the message from Caligula was unmistakable. You exist because I allow it, and I can take that permission away whenever I choose. Caligula, meanwhile, auctioned off their belongings in a public sale. He personally supervised the auction, mocking the items as they were sold. Their furniture, their clothing, and their most personal effects all went to the highest bidder, while the emperor laughed and counted the coins. He also auctioned off gladiators and other property at absurdly inflated prices, forcing wealthy Romans to bid or face his displeasure. One senator fell asleep during an auction and woke up to discover that Caligula had assigned 13 gladiators to him at a total cost that would bankrupt most families. The cruelty was not random, it was systematic entertainment, a show designed for an audience of one. And it revealed something that Rome was only beginning to understand. The boy in the little boots had become something that the empire had no mechanism to control. The knives came for Caligula on a cold January afternoon, and his sisters outlived him to rewrite history. On January 24th, 41 AD, a group of Praetorian guards cornered Caligula in a private passageway beneath the palace. The lead conspirator was an officer named Cassius Chaerea, a man Caligula had repeatedly mocked for having a high-pitched voice. Of all the ways to pick your own assassin, insulting a trained killer's voice on a regular basis has to rank near the top. Chaerea and his co-conspirators stabbed Caligula over 30 times. When they were finished, they killed his wife and smashed his infant daughter's head against a wall. The dynasty of Germanicus, which had begun with so much hope, ended in a corridor soaked with blood. But the bloodline of Germanicus was not entirely gone. Agrippina the Younger survived exile. When Caligula's uncle Claudius became emperor, she was recalled to Rome along with Livilla. Livilla died shortly after, possibly poisoned by Claudius's wife Messalina. But Agrippina was just getting started. She married Claudius himself. She convinced him to adopt her son from a previous marriage, a boy named Nero. And when Claudius became inconvenient, most historians believe Agrippina poisoned him with a plate of mushrooms. Her son Nero became emperor. Agrippina the Younger, the woman Caligula had humiliated, exiled and tried to break, became the most powerful mother in Roman history. She had outlasted her monstrous brother, outmaneuvered an emperor, and placed her own blood on the throne. Of course, Nero eventually had her murdered too, but that is a story for another video. The boy in the little boots never understood that the people he destroyed had longer memories than he did. Caligula ruled for less than 4 years. In that time, he emptied the treasury, terrorized the Senate, declared himself a god, and inflicted suffering on his own family that even Rome's bloodiest tyrants had avoided. His sisters were not innocent bystanders in history. Agrippina proved that by becoming one of the most formidable political operators Rome ever produced. But what Caligula did to them, the control, the degradation, the exile, the public humiliation, went beyond politics or power. It was the behavior of a man who had watched his entire family get destroyed as a child and decided, consciously or not, that he would finish the job himself. The soldiers who dressed him in little boots when he was 3 years old could never have imagined what he would become. The father who carried him through army camps could never have predicted that this boy would grow up to terrorize the people he loved most. But Rome had a way of creating exactly the kind of monsters it feared most. It took damaged children, surrounded them with violence and betrayal, handed them unlimited power, and then acted surprised when they used that power to destroy everything around them. Caligula, the golden child, the last hope of a doomed family, proved that no amount of power can fix what gets broken in the dark. If you want to see how Nero, the son Agrippina, fought so